Welcome to the West County Museum on Main Street in Sebastopol, California. I'd like to take you on a little tour of our most recent exhibit that ran from May until October 2022. And the name of the exhibit is Extra, Extra, Read All About It. And it tells the story of how the Sebastopol Times told the story of our small town. Our museum is a repository of the Sebastopol Times from 1941. Those editions of the Times are kept in our archives. And here's an example of what one of those lovely book collections looks like. And we decided to bring that forward and show our town just how rich a donation this is for us to have here. And we wanted to tell the inside story about how our hometown paper told the story of Sebastopol, and then let you know that this is a place where news becomes our history. So if you come over to this wall and look, this kind of tells the story of how the paper was actually developed and who made the paper so important and who dedicated themselves to the important service of a community to tell our story. This is from 1961, and the theme of this page is National Newspaper Week. And this wall here is kind of a smattering of the people who worked there, how the paper was created, the editors, the writers, and the reporters, some of their work, some of their reports, and old photographs that were given to us. As a matter of fact, one of the editors, Raleigh Atkinson, gave me a tiny little negative, and I wasn't sure what it was. And when we got closer and we enlarged it, it's this beautiful photograph of how most of us in Sebastopol remembered the Times office. And as a matter of fact, once we developed it, we saw that the gentleman in the picture is Ernest Joyner. And many people remember him as being one of our most colorful editors of the Sebastopol Times. As a matter of fact, over time, articles were written calling him the editor Sebastopolians love to hate. He was a colorful man who came from Texas. He had a lot of experience in small newspapers, and he was very opinionated. So often you find the morning after the paper had been printed, everybody discussing his editorial. It brought a lot of attention to Sebastopol. He owned the paper 3 times and finally came to a point where he came back to town, he bought the paper, and quickly fired the existing staff. And that staff got together, and that's when the paper for a little while was 2 papers. We had 2 town papers, Sebastopol Times and the West County News. Though our museum has the hardcovers of the newspaper editions from 1941, the actual Sebastopol Times goes as far back as 1889. So we have a wealth of information to somehow decide what to display and show the public, which was a very hard decision, which brings to mind just how hard a decision the paper the editors had when they had to get out a weekly edition of the Sebastopol Times every week. They had those decisions to make about what was the news. So what we've done here is do a wall, making hard choices over about 100 years of front pages of the Sebastopol Times, and featuring a few of the things that they were famous for, like color inserts at Christmas time, or their colored cartoons in the newspaper. So beginning with the front page from 1900 and working to the centennial edition of the Sebastopol Times, we brought to light the different headlines over 100 years. And something interesting from the 1900 editorial of the Sebastopol Times is a very hot discussion where it's put forth by the editor that the Sebastopol really needs to start to think about how they might be able to support their very own fire department. And the irony, after all this time, is that that is currently an issue facing our Sebastopol City Council again. So as we moved this way, what we decided to do was go back to our own artifacts in our boxcar archive and maybe match up some of the things that have been given to us over time by Sebastopol families that we found on the headlines of various newspapers. For instance, 1942 was a really big year. If you're familiar with Sebastopol, you know about Ives Park and how important that is. And that was the year that Ives Park was given to us and started. So we have in our collection a lot of photos about the activities that have happened over time at Ives. But in addition, we have, if you see here, it's a pole vault. We have a story about a Sebastopol citizen and family, and he was a student at Anley High School, and his sport was pole vaulting, and he broke several records doing that. It's Kanami Ono, and his family bequeathed to us this pole, his shoes from Anley, when he made that famous jump. And the irony is that on this front page, it's discussed the mass removal of our Japanese in the county. And this young man, only 5 years after this photo was taken, was given evacuation orders to leave Sebastopol and go to an internment camp. So it's a very poignant edition of our Sebastopol Times. Now, because there's so much news and so little space to tell all these stories, we've developed a new program called our Pop-Up Mini-Museums. And drawing from the Sebastopol Times history, we put together a display that will go around town and be displayed in several areas, for instance a bank, and let the public actually get a close-up of little vignettes of our history. So our first pop-up was 120 years ago in Sebastopol, based on the Sebastopol Times editions. So this has been real popular, and I think people are looking forward to the next one. So if you come to Sebastopol, visit the museum and also look for our pop-up displays. This wall of the exhibit focuses on natural disasters, beginning with the Black Day that we have pictures of here of the 1906 earthquake. And then the paper has noted over time various and often floods that happen in our area and fires. We have a very active volunteer fire department, always historically in Sebastopol. And then the latest was the Tubbs fire in 2017. And up above us here, these beautiful golden letters, the Sebastopol Times and News, those were also donated to us and used to be found on the outside of the Sebastopol Times building. We like having those. When the newspaper was 100 years old in 1989, the editorial staff decided to do a timeline, and looking in sections of 10 years time, they pulled out specific noteworthy activities or people to try to give a quick story and highlight that century, which is a really hard thing to do. This has been a very popular part of the exhibit, and these notations of people or events or schools being built or famous people going to Hollywood or Regal Ranch coming up or politics does give a good feeling, a good sense of the town and its history and growth over 100 years. So the timeline's been very important, and I would like to point out that the focus here is on the old Anley Theater in Sebastopol, where a lot of us grew up and spent our Saturdays. And I want you to know that our next exhibit, starting on December 3rd, is going to be called Marquise on Main, Take 2, and it's going to be the history of the theaters in Sebastopol. So we hope you come and see that on December 3rd. This section here is all about the ads that were found in the papers. And it's very popular. It's popular with young people too. And it's just a smattering how times change and attitudes change and fashion changes. So if you come in a little close, you can get the idea of the humor involved in these ads over time. like this one. Butter, butter, lots of butter, and the best of butter, right here. So these are very fun to read. And while we're here, I want to point out that throughout the exhibit, there are a number of awards that the Sebastopol Times or the reporters or the editors receive. And this is a first place award in the National Newspaper Association advertising contest. So not only do we find them delightful, but they also won some awards. And there's a good many of them throughout the exhibit here. Pretty proud of that. Okay. When we chose this topic for an exhibit in our museum, it was really for two reasons. Not only because we had these wonderful newspapers to share, but also because we all know that the small town newsprint newspaper is disappearing quickly. And it gave us a question of where do people get their small town news now that this format is gone? And of course everything changes and it's moved online, and there is a news site now called the Sebastopol Times. But it's still poignant to think about what is missing by sitting down with a small town paper in paper and perusing those pages. You know you're going to see every week. It's going to tell you all kinds of story about the people, the politics, the activities, what makes a town and a community special. Those days with small town newspapers are over. And I always wonder, where do you get your news now about the community where you live? So we have here the first Sebastopol Times edition, the very first, August 28, 1889. And we have the last Sonoma West Times and News printed paper framed here. And we've put an article written by Riley Atkinson who discusses the future of local news is digital and the future is now.